Hi, my name is Brian Apavu. I am a neurologist with an interest in philosophy of the mind and living the examined life. Today, I want to dive into the hard problem of consciousness and concepts that go into the idea that consciousness extends beyond the brain. In 1974, philosopher Thomas Nagel published his famous essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? In it, he argued that even if we knew everything about a bat's biology, the structure of its brain, the mechanics of echolocation, the chemistry of its nervous system, we would still never know what it is for the bat itself to experience the world. Nagel's point was not about bats per se, but about the limits of objective science. Consciousness has a subjective character. There is always a what is like aspect to experience. The subjective point of view cannot be captured from the outside, no matter how much objective knowledge we gather. To truly know what it is like to be a bat, we would have to be a bat. The philosopher David Chalmers is an Australian philosopher currently at New York University. He drew inspiration from Nagel's argument when formulating the hard problem of consciousness. Chalmers famously distinguished between what he called easy problems of consciousness and the hard problem. The easy problems are not trivial. They involve explaining how the brain perceives, attends to information, stores memory, and generates behavior. But these are the problems that science can approach with the tools of neuroscience, psychology, and computational modeling. In principle, we can map neural circuits, measure brain activity, and describe the causal processes behind these functions. The hard problem goes deeper. It asks, why should any of this information processing give rise to experience at all? Why isn't the brain just a biological computer that behaves intelligently but without any inner life? The subjective first-person aspect, what philosophers call the qualia, is the raw feeling of a sensation. The redness of red, the bitterness of coffee, the pain of a headache. Chalmers argued that no purely physical description of the brain can fully explain why these subjective experiences exist. We know everything about the neuron circuits and computations, but that still leaves us open with the question of why it feels like something to be us. This framing has profound implications. By identifying a gap between physical processes and conscious experience, Chalmers opens the door to a framework that looks beyond the brain. If the hard problem cannot be solved by physicalism alone, perhaps consciousness is fundamental to reality, or perhaps it extends into the environment and systems around us. The idea has spurred interest in theories such as panpsychism, dualism, and the extended mind hypothesis, all of which challenge the view that consciousness is fully reducible to brain biology. In their influential 1998 paper, The Extended Mind, Andy Kark and David Chalmers argued that the mind should not be confined to what happens inside the skull. Instead, cognition is a process that extends into the world, shaped and supported by the tool environments that we interact with. According to this view, external objects that play a reliable role in our thinking, such as a notebook, calculator, or even a smartphone, can become part of our cognitive system. The boundaries of the mind, in other words, do not stop at the skin or skull, but they stretch outward into the world around us. One of the famous examples that they have is Otto's notebook. Otto, who suffers from memory impairment, relies on his notebook to record addresses, schedules, and other vital information. When Otto wants to recall information where a museum is located, he doesn't search his biological memory, he looks it up in his notebook. In this sense, the notebook functions just like memory would for someone without impairment. Clark and Chalmers argue that the notebook is not merely a tool, but actually part of Otto's mind, since it reliably stores and retrieves information in the same way a biological system would. This idea has radical implications for modern life. If Otto's notebook counts as a part of his mind, what about the smartphones we carry, or the cloud-based AI that we consult for answers, or even the cultural systems like language and mathematics that structure our thoughts? The extended mind hypothesis suggests that humans can already be hybrid beings with cognition distributed across brain, body, and world. Our sense of self and consciousness may not be an isolated process, but rather an ongoing collaboration between the brain and environment it inhabits. This is all the more interesting and critical in our emerging world of brain-computer interfaces. Karl Popper, one of the most influential philosophers in the 20th century, offered a framework for thinking about consciousness and reality through what he called the three worlds. His aim was to clarify how human knowledge, subjective experience, and physical reality relate to one another. In his work, World 1 is the realm of physical objects and events, the biological brain, the nervous system, and the material universe. World 2 is the realm of subjective experience, thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, and conscious states. World 3 is the world of objective knowledge and cultural products, mathematics, science, language, art, and philosophical ideas. Popper emphasized that while World 2 emerges from World 1, it cannot be reduced to it. Consciousness, in his view, is not just neurons firing, but a distinct level of reality. What's more, World 2 interacts dynamically with World 3. For example, a mathematical theorem exists in World 3, but it is experienced and understood through World 2, and it can shape events in World 1 when applied in technology. This layered view highlights why consciousness cannot be fully captured by biology alone. The mind navigates across these three realms, and human experience involves constant interplay between them. Popper's framework also resists materialist reductionism by affirming that ideas, though immaterial, have causal power in the physical world. Taken seriously, his theory suggests that the mind extends into culture, language, and shared knowledge, pushing us once again to consider that consciousness may be far more expansive than the brain itself. Sir John Eccles was a pioneering neuroscientist whose groundbreaking research on synaptic neurotransmission earned him the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1963. His experiments illuminated how neurons communicate across synapses using chemical messengers, a discovery that firmly grounded the study of the brain in biology. But Eccles was not content to stop at biology alone. Despite his role in mapping the physical basis of neural communication, he came to believe that the mind could not be fully and solely explained in terms of material processes. In his later work, particularly in collaboration with Karl Popper in The Self and Its Brain, Eccles argued that he argued for a form of dualistic interactionism. He proposed that the mind and the brain are distinct but interrelated realities. For Eccles, conscious intentions, our thoughts, decisions, and acts of will, are not simply the byproduct of neuronal activity. Instead, he suggested that the mind can influence the brain, guiding probabilities of neuronal firing patterns in ways that are not reducible to physical causation alone. This was a bold claim, pushing against strict materialism in neuroscience. Eccles' stance is controversial but is also profound. By insisting that the mind is not identical to the brain, he opened a space for consciousness to be seen as an active participant in shaping neural events rather than a passive reflection of them. His work bridges rigorous neuroscience with a philosophical openness to immaterial aspects of reality, keeping alive the possibility that our inner lives have genuine causal power. In the larger context of consciousness beyond the brain, Eccles adds scientific weight to the idea that the mind cannot be fully contained within the confines of biology. David Deutsch, a physicist at Oxford University and one of the founding figures of quantum computation, is also one of the strongest advocates for the many-world interpretation of quantum mechanics. According to his view, the first proposed by Hugh Everett in the 1950s, every quantum event spans multiple outcomes, each realized in a separate parallel universe. David Deutsch took this radical idea seriously and argued that the multiverse is not just a mathematical abstraction, but the literal structure of reality. In this framework, there isn't just one version of you. There may be countless others, each living out different possibilities in different universes. The implications for consciousness are staggering. If our brains are quantum systems embedded in a universe, could consciousness itself have multiple branches across parallel worlds? Might we experience this as continuity of the self and it be one thread among many, with other versions of us experience alternative paths? This was best portrayed in a recent film, Everything All at Once. While speculative, this perspective pushes the boundaries of how we think about personal identity and subjective experience. Deutsch also connects the broader pursuit of knowledge. In The Fabric of Reality, one of his books, he suggests that the explanations in science, mathematics, biology, and even philosophy are deeply linked, and that consciousness may not be fully understood until we embrace its multiversal context. For those exploring consciousness beyond the brain, the multiverse represents perhaps the most radical expansion, our minds not only extending into tools, culture, and knowledge, but potentially spanning across multiple universes and multiple realities. From David Chalmers' hard problem to the extended mind, to Popper's and Eccles' frameworks for dualism, and finally to Deutsch's multiverse, one theme emerges. Consciousness may not be contained by the brain alone. It interacts with culture, knowledge, and technology, and perhaps even the very fabric of reality itself. The question remains, are we simply brains generating an illusion of mind, or are our conscious selves participants in something larger, extending beyond biology, beyond culture, and maybe even beyond the universe we know? If you enjoyed this video, I hope you like this video and subscribe to my channel. I hope to talk to you again soon.